screams, smoke, the sound of engines tearing themselves apart. And then, the camera shook as the massive shadow of a military cargo plane dipped far too low over the horizon. It was a C-17 Globemaster, a beast of a machine, 32 wheels, wingspan wider than most city streets. A plane designed for war zones and relief missions. But this one was on fire, dragging smoke across the sky like a wounded animal. People on the ground froze. Drivers abandoned their cars in the middle of the highway. Someone fumbled for a phone. And the live stream began. Greater than, oh my God, it's coming down. It's coming down right on us. That was the hook. The video racked up 80 million views within 24 hours. But what people didn't know then, what no headline could fit into a neat package, was the strange, tangled story that put a disgraced pilot, a single dad CEO, and a stubborn daughter in the same line of destiny that afternoon. The pilot who wasn't supposed to fly. Her name was Ava Raines. She had been a captain in the Air Force until 3 months earlier, when a training exercise went wrong. She had ignored orders, pulled a maneuver deemed reckless, and though she landed everyone alive, her career ended with a discharge that read, unfit for command judgment. The truth was harsher. Ava was brilliant, fearless, but too unpredictable for the chain of command. She could thread a needle with a 4-engine jet, but she couldn't thread herself into the tight box of rules her superiors worshipped. So she ended up here, a private cargo contractor, flying half-worn C-17s for companies that didn't ask questions, just signatures. And on this September morning, she was at the controls of a bird that had no right to still be in the air. When engine 2 blew out, followed by hydraulic failure, her co-pilot screamed into the radio. Ava didn't scream. She just narrowed her eyes at the altimeter and said, greater than, we're not dying today. Not on my watch. Miles away, in a glass office tower, Ethan Cole, 36, founder of a tech empire, was staring at an entirely different disaster. On paper, he had everything. Billions in valuation, investors begging for a piece, a skyline penthouse. But off paper, he had one thing gnawing at him. He was a single dad with a daughter who refused to smile for the cameras anymore. Her name was Lila, 11 years old, smart as a whip, and angry. Angry that her mom had left. Angry that her dad was always too busy. Angry that the only people who tucked her in at night were nannies. Ethan had tried toys, trips, private tutors. Nothing worked. The investors whispered that his daughter's sulks were hurting his image. And then, in a moment of ridiculous desperation, he clicked order on a website that promised companionship solutions. It was half a joke, half an experiment. He wanted someone who could pretend to be his girlfriend, make the tabloids write kinder headlines, maybe soften the storm. He didn't expect Lila to find the contract email on his laptop. Dad, she had said, standing in the doorway of his office with a fury that only 11-year-olds can summon, you're ordering a girlfriend. Like a pizza, Ethan had stammered. He had tried to explain branding, optics, loneliness. But Lila cut him off with 4 words that stunned him. Greater than, can I start forever? At first he thought she was mocking him. But her eyes were glassy, serious. She didn't want a girlfriend in the house. She wanted him, her real dad, to start forever, with her. Not with someone bought, borrowed, or faked. That night, Ethan shut down the companionship website. For the first time in months, he canceled a meeting to sit on the couch with Lila, watching cartoons until she fell asleep against his shoulder. It should have been the start of healing, but fate, as it turned out, had other plans. The first driver to capture the video was a high school teacher named Rosa. She was on her way back from a field trip, bus full of teenagers singing badly in the back, when the shadow fell over the highway. The kids stopped singing. The bus shook. Rosa screamed, hold on. The C-17 dipped lower, its belly nearly scraping over an overpass sign, before Ava wrestled it back up. Sparks tore from the landing gear. Someone shouted, she's insane. She's trying to land it here. But the truth was simpler. She had no other choice. Every airfield within 50 miles was out of reach. The only stretch long and flat enough was right in front of her, Highway 71. Her co-pilot had already pulled the ejection handle. He was gone. Ava muttered, coward, then gritted her teeth and shoved the yoke forward. Meanwhile, Ethan's black SUV was cutting down that same highway. Lila sat beside him, scrolling on her phone. "Dad," she said suddenly. "Why is everyone live streaming a plane?" Ethan frowned. "What plane?" And then he saw it. The impossible sight of a flaming C-17 bearing down on the very stretch of road ahead. Cars swerved off into ditches. Horns blared. The SUV shook as Ethan slammed the brakes. He would never forget the next second. His daughter's scream, his own hand reaching instinctively across her chest to hold her in place, and the monstrous roar of engines as the aircraft skimmed so low they could see the pilot's face. A woman. Focused. Fierce. Eyes locked on survival. When the wheels hit asphalt, the sound was like thunder cracking. Tires shredded. Metal screeched sparks across the blacktop. Cars exploded out of the way, some crunching into each other, but somehow, impossibly, the plane stayed straight. Ava fought the yoke with every ounce of muscle she had. Her arms burned. Her lungs screamed. But the beast slowed, until finally it groaned to a stop just short of a bridge. Silence followed. The kind of silence that only comes after death has missed you by inches. And then the screaming began. Phones up. People live streaming. Hashtags exploding. Hashtag highway pilot. Hashtag reckless or hero. Hash C-17 miracle. The world had just witnessed what the Air Force had once punished her for, her recklessness. But now it looked like genius. Ethan staggered out of the SUV, pulling Lila into his arms, both of them trembling. He turned toward the plane and saw the pilot climbing down from the smoking hull. Ava Raines. The woman who shouldn't have been flying. The woman who had just changed their lives forever. Lila whispered, "Dad, she saved us." And Ethan knew, somehow, that this wasn't the end of the story. This was the beginning. The world erupted within hours. Clips of the landing spread across every platform. News anchors debated whether Ava Raines was a reckless maniac or the bravest pilot alive. Talk shows called it the miracle on Highway 71. Hashtags trended across languages, and in the middle of the chaos, Ava sat alone on the tailgate of an ambulance, her flight suit streaked with smoke, her palms blistered. Reporters circled like hawks, microphones shoved toward her face. "Captain Raines, how did you? Were you the one responsible for the accident? Did you endanger lives by attempting that landing?" Ava said nothing. She only stared at the highway she had turned into a runway. Somewhere deep inside, she knew it. The Air Force had called her reckless. The world was about to call her a hero. But she didn't feel like either. She just felt tired. Ethan didn't intend to approach her. He had a daughter to calm, investors blowing up his phone, and a million headlines already dragging his name into the incident. Billionaire CEO narrowly escapes death in highway plane landing. But Lila insisted. "Dad," she said, tugging his sleeve, her voice steadier than he expected. "She saved us. You have to talk to her." So Ethan walked with his daughter across the asphalt, weaving past fire trucks and camera crews, until they reached Ava. She looked up, wary, as if bracing for another attack. Ethan extended his hand. "You don't know me, but I owe you my life." Ava eyed the hand for a long moment before shaking it. Her grip was rough, strong, but trembling at the edges. "Just doing my job." "No," Lila said firmly, stepping forward. "You did more than that. You didn't give up. Everyone else ran, even your co-pilot." Ava blinked at her, startled by the girl's bluntness. Then, for the first time that day, she smiled, a small, tired curve of her lips. "Guess I don't know how to quit." By the next morning, Ava's face was everywhere. Memes, fan edits, slow-motion clips of her jaw tightening in the cockpit. Articles dug into her past, her discharge, her so-called recklessness. But instead of burying her, the storm lifted her higher. The narrative flipped. The military threw away a maverick genius, and she just saved hundreds of lives. Investors who had once scoffed at Ethan's company now called him non-stop, hoping for a quote, a partnership, anything connected to the pilot everyone loved. Ethan ignored most of them. He couldn't stop replaying the image of Ava climbing down from the smoking plane. And Lila couldn't stop talking about her. "Dad," she said one evening, "she's not like the people in your meetings. She's real. You should hire her." Ethan chuckled. "Hire her for what? She's a pilot, not a programmer." Lila crossed her arms. "Hire her to keep us alive. Hire her to be around. Ethan had no answer to that. But a seed was planted. A week later, Ethan found Ava in the one place he didn't expect, sitting in a quiet diner off the interstate, sipping coffee alone, her fame swirling outside while she hid in plain sight. "Thought you'd be in Hollywood by now," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. Ava arched an eyebrow. "Not my style. Fame doesn't land planes." "What does?" he asked. She met his gaze, steady, knowing when to risk everything. For a moment, Ethan said nothing. He recognized that edge in her, the same edge that had driven him to build an empire from nothing, to gamble millions on ideas no one else believed in. Reckless, the board had called him once. Genius, later. She was his reflection, in a different uniform. "I need someone like you," Ethan said finally. "Not as a pilot, as something else. A partner. Not in the tabloids, not fake. Real." Ava leaned back, studying him. "You mean in business?" He hesitated. "I mean in life. My daughter. She needs people who don't quit. And so do I." That night, Lila found Ava sitting on the penthouse balcony, staring at the city lights. "Are you going to stay?" the girl asked, no pretense in her tone. Ava glanced at her. "I don't know. Your dad thinks I should." Lila nodded solemnly. "I think you should too. Because I asked him for forever. But forever's too big for just two people. We need three." The words hit Ava harder than the crash, harder than the headlines. For so long she had been defined by mistakes, by rules broken, by names like Reckless. And here was a child saying she could be part of something bigger than survival. Something lasting. Ava reached out, ruffling Lila's hair gently. "Forever's a lot of responsibility, kid." Lila grinned. "You landed a plane on a highway. I think you can handle it." Months later, the video of the landing still circled the internet, played in classrooms, studied by flight academies. People called it reckless. People called it heroic. But in a quiet home, above the skyline, Ava sat at a dinner table with Ethan and Lila, laughter mixing with the smell of pasta. For once, no one called her anything at all. She wasn't a failed captain. She wasn't a viral star. She wasn't reckless. She was simply part of a family. And that, she realized, was the greatest landing of all.